Let's give God a hand praise. Turn to your seats. So, for those of you who don't know, my name is Cazares-Thomas. I'm the senior pastor here at Cathedral of Hope, and it really is a joy to welcome you to worship this evening. We're in for a treat tonight. For the last few months, we have been anticipating Colby's arrival and have been excited and ecstatic and calling on the Holy Spirit to provide words for him, to ensure that what he brings to us this evening is edifying both to himself but also to each and every one of us, and that brings glory to the God that we worship. So you might be asking, who is Colby? If you open your bulletin, I'm going to read just a little bit about his bio. Colby Martin grew up in Oregon, spent less than, when he was 6 years old, spent less than 6 years outside Phoenix, and now inhabits America's finest city. That's debatable. San Diego. I think we live in the finest city here in Dallas, but we'll let him have it for tonight. While there, he's pretentious about his coffee and his craft beer. And there's some good craft beer here in Dallas, if ever you consider relocating. He fails at learning to surf. He cuts his own hair and he blogs intermittently, don't we all? And you can follow him and you can see that at Colby Martin online. I had the joy to spend just a little bit of time with Colby this afternoon, where I was able to tease him just a little bit. I've come from the olden days of gaydom, when you were out on the street and my gaydar would go off left, right, and center. And so we talked a little bit about that because, Colby, has perfect hair and is fabulous and good looking. All the things that my gaydar used to go off on. And we were talking about, the practicing homosexuals and practicing homosexuality. And Colby said to me, he's a practicing metrosexual. So I'm glad to welcome to the pulpit of Cathedral of Hope United Church of Christ. Please welcome with me a practicing metrosexual, Colby Martin.
Thanks, Neil. I've never been introduced like that before. Hello, friends. You just have no idea how beautiful it is for me to be here with you in Dallas, what they call the San Diego of the South. It's at our church, our vision statement is that we would be a community alive in the truth that we are loved, liberated, and empowered. And as I stood here this evening worshiping with you, with this incredible worship band, I was overwhelmed with this energy that I am in this room with some seriously empowered people. I'm singing these words and sharing breath and energy with some people who are truly liberated. Like that's you. I feel it. I can feel your liberation, your empowerment, and of course, you are beautiful, loved children of God. Amen. And we're singing this song about trusting in the faithfulness of God and having this confidence. And I'm conscious of the fact that while I don't know you yet personally, my assumption is that many of you have in your story a chapter or chapters or maybe entire books full of stories of pain from church. Stories of feeling wounded by Christianity, by faith leaders, at times maybe even feeling wounded by God, and yet you're here tonight in a church singing worship music. So there's a sense in which you are here saying there is something within me that still buys into the love of God, that still clings to the faithfulness of God, that in spite of pain, in spite of the chaos that might have come at some point in my life, I'm here tonight. And so to be with you and feel your liberation, your collective liberation is just so incredibly empowering. So thank you for letting me be with you here tonight. Thanks to Chris and to Aaron and to Neil and the rest of the staff for letting me be here with you this evening. To wrap up your series, which has been sort of inspired by this book that I wrote and came out last year. I just think, what a fantastic thing to have happen in the world, and that I get to be here to close it out and really be, the token straight white guy. There's not too many places where I get to be the token straight white guy. And so here I am tonight getting to wrap up this series and standing in this space. It's really a gift. It's a gift. Speaking of straight white guys. So yesterday, the Nashville Statement. I don't know how many of you saw this. I know this is a UCC church, so you might not have much overlap or interaction with kind of the evangelical world. But there's this thing that came out yesterday called the Nashville Statement. And it's this online statement of like 12 articles of affirmations of non-affirmation. It is this statement that is signed by like essentially 150 straight white gatekeepers or theoretical gatekeepers of evangelical Christianity. And they came together in Nashville and they created this, I guess they felt they needed to make more clear their stance. They created this statement, like affirming their non-affirmation of LGBTQ people. And so it breaks down each article that they are affirming sort of this traditional understanding of marriage and sexuality and gender identity and denying this idea that the kingdom of God is open for all people. And I'm reading the statement yesterday, the Nashville Statement, and just sick at heart that once again a bunch of straight white men got in a room and decided we're going to take what was like a proverbial line in the sand and just take away it's just a line in the sand now that says if you are with us theologically, then you get to be a Christian. If you're not, then I'm sorry, you don't get to be considered a Christ follower. And I start there because in part it's like one more time where as a straight white man, I'm like, I have to apologize for my people. Because we have the stories of pain that you have experienced in your life, by and large, are a result of my people. Because we have been these gatekeepers, noxiously so, for far too long. And what was really present for me yesterday as I was reading this, and I was like some of the signers, the initial people who signed this statement were men that wrote the textbooks for the college that I went to. The J.I. Packers, the John Pipers. I grew up, I'm a recovering Baptist. I thought I heard someone else here tonight that's a recovering Baptist. Yep, thank you, I see that hand. The Nashville Statement, that was in many ways the trajectory that I was on. So I grew up in a Baptist home. I got oversaved in high school. I don't know if you've ever met somebody oversaved, but that's a fascinating experience. Went to a Christian college, got my degree, and I could answer all the Bible things, and I was on this trajectory for success in the evangelical world. And this, my first pastoral job out of college was at a church in Salem, Oregon. And I was going through the process of becoming a licensed pastor. And I had to study the church manual to go through the interview process. And I remember, at this point I'm firmly rooted in my sort of conservative theological world. And I remember reading through the policies manual, and there was this line there that said something to the effect of, and this is what we were talking about at lunch today, practicing homosexuals may not be members of a church. And I remember reading that line and just this pit in my stomach of, wait, what? Okay, theologically, sure, I understand the conservative position, and that was what I bought into at the time. That was what I was raised with and could argue and defend, but can't be members? And then I read on farther and couldn't be in volunteer positions. And I just, for the first time, I noticed this incredible disconnect between my head, my theology, what I believed, and my heart. What I felt, something's not right here. And that was the first time I noticed that my head and my heart were out of alignment. And then in about 2005, I began this theological journey to the left, and so many dominoes began to fall as I began to read people I've never read before, ask questions I've never asked before, be open to possibilities I'd never been open to before. And there was a point at which I realized that this misalignment, I want to get settled. I want to figure out if this theological position that has been handed to me and I've sort of swallowed hook, line, and sinker is really what the Bible says and is really something with conviction I can believe in. And so that I began a study of the clobber passages. I began to look in let's actually figure this out. And I've listened to the messages the last 4 weeks that your amazing staff has given here. And I just think they've done a fantastic job of breaking down for you what these passages say and don't say. And at the end of this study, I was pleased to report to myself, your head and your heart can be in alignment because the Bible does not condemn those who were born and identify LGBTQ. Hallelujah. The Bible does not have this explicit condemnation against any and all same-sex sex acts. That's fantastic. And I had this moment of, finally I can have this alignment of my head and my heart. And yet, at the time, I was serving in a large evangelical megachurch. And so even though my convictions on the inside had shifted, externally I was not in a safe place to talk about it. And so I spent a couple years in that role, once again being out of alignment. This time it wasn't the head and the heart, it was sort of my internal convictions with my external reality. And I think you might know what I'm talking about when I describe life as walking around very closed off to people. And my relationships were incredibly shallow because this is how you connect with people. You do this. You open up. Say, this is me, all of me. I see you, you see me. And I didn't feel safe for a number of reasons. And so my relationships were really shallow, and I had these years of just being torn of my inner world and my outer world not being matched up. And as I tell in the book in a little more detail, that all came to a head. I ended up getting fired from the church when they discovered my theology on sexuality. And that, as painful as that was, at least now I could do this to the world. Be like, finally, I'm out of the theological closet, okay? So yes, world, this is me, a straight white guy that has evangelical roots, and these are my thoughts on the Bible. And that was what led to the writing of the book, where I try to break down the clobber passages, going straight through the heart of the text. Because I think for many people, there's an assumption that if you're progressive or you're open and affirming, then you're just ignoring the Bible. And I'm like, no, you can actually go right through the heart of these things. And on the other side of them, discover a faith more inclusive and loving and alive and compelling and hospitable. And so I had this book, and it's been out for the last year. And one of the questions that I get asked, I think more often than not, is why did you write this book? And we were talking about this at lunch, that I don't have a particular dog in the fight. I didn't have my first gay friend until after I'd gotten fired over my theology and moved to an entirely different city. So I didn't really know anyone or have family or friends. And so I often get asked, why'd you write this book? And there's a story in the Gospel of Luke. I think Matthew tells the story too, but I like Luke's version better. It's chapter 18. And the story is this. Jesus is walking through Jericho, and he's got a crowd of people following him. And there's a blind man doing what blind people had to do, which is essentially sit on the side of the road and beg. And there's this blind beggar, and he senses this commotion moving by, this large crowd, this movement, this energy, this bustle moving by, and he says, "What's going on? What's all the commotion?" And someone says, "Oh, Jesus of Nazareth, that quirky rabbi from up north, he's here. He's here." And something in the blind man, something in the beggar came alive. Because he must have heard some story or rumors about this strange rabbi from Nazareth. And so he shouts out, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." And of course, the crowd is so large and so noisy that nobody hears him. So he yells a little bit louder, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." And, Luke says that some people in the crowd, presumably maybe some of Jesus' followers. You could envision some of his disciples, and they say to the man, like, God, you're annoying. Quiet. Like he doesn't have time. We're moving. We got things to do. We got fish to pull out of the air. We got water to turn into wine. Like we got things to do. So quiet, man. You're super obnoxious right now. And he just yells out further, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Shh, quiet, quiet, quiet. And finally, his cries reach the ears of Jesus. And you can envision Jesus in this crowd of people, like hearing off in the distance, this man, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And he stops. Now, what Jesus does next is what I find so hauntingly beautiful. Because Jesus didn't hear the man crying out, turn his direction, part the crowds, Moses style, and like go to the blind man to say, what can I do for you? Could have done that. Could have gone to the man. He could have, I imagine, he showed some prowess for miracle working. So I imagine he could have just from afar been like mercy, sent, like extra mud, fling it. I don't know. He could have done that. He could have done some mercy from afar. Didn't do that. What he did, Luke says, Jesus ordered that the man be brought to him. Which is to say that Jesus turned to the very people who moments ago restricted access to Jesus. The men who kept the barrier from the beggar to the rabbi. The men who built the wall that said, no, you are on the outside. Jesus turned to those and said, you go get him and bring him here. This haunts me because I hear in this a call to those who have been a part of systems, who have benefited from systems. I hear in this a call for those who have participated in the building of walls to restrict access to Jesus. If you have been a part of that, what I hear from Jesus is it is your job now to break that wall down and go to the margins, go to the outsiders, go to the outcasts. It's up to you. You built the wall, you tear it down. So I'm reading this stinking Nashville Statement and all these gatekeepers that have built these walls, keeping on the outside beautiful human beings like those in this very room, saying, Savior doesn't have time for you. You're not quite worthy enough to get his attention. Maybe go get unblind first. And I see that in the context of this passage in Luke 18 and in my own story. And I'm like, why did I write this book? Well, because I have been a part of this system of restricting access to Jesus for those on the margins for far too long. And to whatever extent I can be a part of tearing that down and no longer restricting access, but actually participating in the expansion of the table, which is what the whole thing is about in the first place. To the extent that I can do that, I give my life to it. And this is what I think, in many ways, the goal of Jesus is this I call it the ever-expanding guest list for the party of God. The table that just grows and grows, and everybody has a seat with their name on it. And there was a sense in which at some point in our Christian tradition, our Christian heritage, we lost sight of that. And we started closing off the guest list and shrinking the table. And I'm so grateful for communities like this that have this long, beautiful history of saying, no. Everybody's in, baby. All or part. Which leads me to talk about eunuchs. Naturally. It's exactly where you thought I was going. So eunuchs in the ancient world, there's this, I'm going to talk about what Jesus said, and then I'm going to talk about eunuchs in the ancient world, and then I'm going to talk about something from the book of Acts. So in the ancient world, eunuch was like an umbrella term that was used to describe a couple of different situations, okay? And Jesus actually in Matthew 19 lays out all of these situations pretty perfectly and poetically. Jesus is he's being asked about divorce, and he has this comment at the end of his thoughts on divorce, and he says, essentially my translation, what I'm about to say is really difficult to understand. So it's really only for those who can truly grasp it. And then Jesus says, for there are some eunuchs that are made eunuchs by man-made eunuchs. Then there are some eunuchs that are born that way. Hashtag Lady Gaga. Then there are some eunuchs that choose that for the sake of the kingdom. And then there are some eunuchs that are given round shields, long spears, and told to fight for the dragon queen. That's not true. Really, no Game of Thrones fans in here? Did I miss my audience by a mile? The Unsullied? Okay, moving on. 3 types of eunuchs, not 4. And this was how the ancient world at this time, this is how they used the term eunuchs. You had man-made eunuchs, okay? So I think we all know what a man-made eunuch is, a castrated male, so that they can do duties usually by people in charge and not have to worry about, the wives or the concubines. Then there were, as Jesus said, those who became like a eunuch for the sake of a kingdom. So those who sort of entered into this celibate lifestyle so that they could focus on spirituality. But there's this born that way eunuch that is fascinating. And the ancients called this a natural eunuch or a born eunuch. And there were Roman slave laws where if you bought a slave and it turned out to be a natural eunuch, a born eunuch, you could return it. And a natural or born eunuch was a male who essentially showed no interest in women. Had all the biological features, wasn't castrated, had all the right plumbing, but showed no proclivity towards the female. So I take this concept of eunuchs, the way that they used eunuch and man-made or natural, and I see Jesus just sort of naming that. He's like, this is hard to understand, y'all, but those who have ears, let them hear. There are those who are born that way. And then that's it. Like he just sort of drops that out there. He just sort of affirms that that's a thing. That'd be interesting enough, but it gets even more fascinating for me when you get to Acts chapter 8. And some of you know this story. This is Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. And the story is that there was a eunuch traveling out of away from the region of Galilee back to Ethiopia, and he's in this chariot, I think. I don't actually remember that detail. And Philip, a disciple, a convert, a follower of the way, runs into this Ethiopian eunuch who happens to be reading an old scroll of Isaiah, and he says to Philip, do you know what's going on here? And so Philip explains Jesus and opens up the gospel message to him. Essentially says to this eunuch, yeah, this table of God is open for everybody. There's a spot right here with your name on it. You want in? And the eunuch says, man, what's stopping me from being baptized right now? Philip says, nothing, let's do it. We don't know if this eunuch was man-made or born eunuch. I don't know that that's totally the point. The point is that this movement of Jesus, this mission to expand the guest list, this mission to broaden and lengthen the table so that everybody knows that they are a part, in the book of Acts is breaking all sorts of barriers. And in Acts chapter 8, it moves into the area of the sexual other. And it says, yes, you, of course. What's stopping you from being baptized? Nothing. 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 when Jesus was himself baptized by his cousin John. The gospel writers do their best to describe the scene as though there was some sort of presence ascending from above like a dove and coming to like somehow be upon Jesus. And they say there was even this voice. This voice. And you remember what the voice said, right? This is my son, in whom I am well pleased. My friends, let us not think that that word is just for Jesus. That is the word that is spoken to all of us. Jesus was just the first fruits of new creation. And this is what I want to say to you tonight. This is, in many ways, my life's mission, because I was a part of this system to restrict access for so long, and now I'm a part of doing my best to tear it down and going out to the margins and saying, my friends, the divine says to you, you are a loved child of mine, and I'm well pleased, just as you are. You are a loved son of God, fully just as you are. You are a loved daughter of God, just as you. You are a loved child of God. This is the divine statement. The divine statement. And it is the only statement that matters. Not some stupid Nashville statement. The divine statement that you are a loved child of God, beautiful and whole and wonderful. And in you, the divine is well pleased. Thanks for having me here tonight.